Hi there, it's Polly here, back from dance class with tea. Haha. Mm. So, I wasn't going to tell anecdotes that are a bit of a downer, but this one's a bit of a downer as far as I'm concerned, so I might as well share it with some of you guys because it does serve as a warning. So, okay, so two real things back. I had a sort of an interesting friend years ago who I just kind of met in my early author days, and that was Terry Pratchett. Terry was someone that I met in my very, very early convention going days. I went over to an American convention, and I was a speaking sort of guest of honor, and so was Terry. And we were the only Commonwealthy people there. So, we kind of met. They had like a party for all the people who were guests and panelists and volunteers and so on the night before. And, we were a bit kind of, we didn't know anyone. But we each heard sort of the Commonwealthy accents. So we sort of like zoomed in. And we spent a cool time together that evening swapping jokes. And we became friends ever since. So that was in the mid '80s. So I just knew Terry. He was a friend. We corresponded back and forth. We met each other regularly at conventions. Till the day he died. So they wanted to do a Discworld computer game in the '90s. So they contacted me to do all of the comedy dialogue that would go with this. Now, this game was being done by some guys. The main designer was someone who had been at Beam Software, of whom I've told you tales before. A living hell of a company, truly was. But this guy had escaped, and he'd gone off to the UK, where he had founded his own little games company, and he'd teamed up with another group of guys who had a games company. So they needed all this comedy dialogue, and particularly at that stage, probably still, to be honest, I am the only real game designer in the world that's also a novelist. So if you want vast amounts of dialogue done, I can just do it, because I write for film and all this sort of stuff. So they needed something like what was it, 120,000 words of spoken dialogue written for this, and they kind of needed it fairly quick, and it all had to be funny. So okay, they got me. So off I went to the UK to do this job for them, so a working visa. And they put me up in a complete hole in the ground. It was a cellar under these flats. There were cockroaches on the walls, and the road outside was sort of prostitution central. So there were phone booths, God help us, everywhere, and prostitutes would put these kind of cards in them, kind of like, about this big, with, call naughty Nancy the nurse, and, here's a phone number, diddly-diddly, with these pictures on them. I would actually gather these things up and I would send them to people as postcards, because it's like, whatever. But they had me on essentially no money while I was over there. They'd give me a tiny bit of survival money, so they said, and I would be paid royalties when this thing comes out. Well, it's a Terry Pratchett kind of Discworld game, so I guess it will sell. So all right, and I was desperate because I had no work, and at that stage I had a little crappy house which I was desperately trying to make payments on. So all right, I will do the job. So I'm over there. So this is where the warning thing comes in. I knew Terry pretty damn well, and Terry was very contemptuous. Bless him, but he was very contemptuous of some industries, which included the computer games industry. He didn't really want to talk to or deal with the computer games guys, so I was kind of the liaison there, which is why they needed me, So if they need to tell Terry something, they tell me to tell Terry, and if Terry needs to tell them something, he tells me and I tell them. Began to suspect that Terry, it was supposed to be half the dialogue would be done by me and half of it would be done by Terry. I began to suspect that Terry would not do his half of the dialogue. So I pre-wrote all of his stuff and I just put it aside in case there was an emergency, and he kind of decided, he could be pretty high-handed, I'm afraid, and just declare he wasn't doing it. And I'm glad I did, because, of course, 10 days before the deadline for this thing, they called me in a huge panic. It's like, Terry said he's not going to do his half of the dialogue. He's changing that bit of the contract. He's not going to do it. So what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? He says, well, it just so happens I did this for you. Here you go. Because they were fellow gamers, they were ex-Beam software people, that whom Beam has drawn together, let they never be cast aside. Well, I'll tell you how well that went. I've alluded to bits and pieces of this before. So Terry and I had known each other for years, by the way, and there'd been moments like I'd been at a convention with Terry. We were both guests, and I was just standing like down the corridor talking to some people. Apparently what happened is someone came racing up to Terry Pratchett, and he had like a box in his hands, and just, I was just wondering, before you go, could I get you to sign a couple of your books? And Terry said, well, I will only sign one book. I will only sign one from any person. And the kid looked kind of disappointed. All right, well, I'll have to choose one. He opened the box and went through it, and he pulled out Musa Kerbridge, one of mine. And Terry said, well, that's not one of mine. That's kids. And pointed down, and the guy didn't even say, oh, sorry, my mistake, or thank you, or anything. He just turned, and he ran up to me. And to kind of pour salt into the wound, kid ran up to me with the box and said, could I get you to sign a couple of your books? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm just standing there talking to people. Will you only sign one? Says, why? How many have you got? Well, I've got Musa Kerbridge, and I've got Fangs of Karth, and I've got Whisper Wings here. So, sure, I'll sign those for you. What's your name? Why not? Hey, there you go. And so yeah, apparently. So yes, we had our moments. I've told this one before, but I'll tell it again. So Terry thought he was quite clever because he was smarter than the fans. They don't know where he lives. They don't know what he does. So he doesn't have to worry about being mobbed. So I'm in London, and I was just living in absolute misery in this sodding cellar because they didn't give me any money. I would actually have to go up, and I'm Australian. I'm old and vicious now. I wasn't as vicious in those young days. This is what made me this way, this whole project. I would have to sort of ask for handouts from them. These days I'd have just smashed open their cash box and taken stuff. However, I was getting these little handouts on, but I went down to a comic store because I wrote a lot of comics in those days. Wanted to see what the British comics are up to. There's a carousel of like local comics and little home done fanzines near the front door of this store, Forbidden Planet, or as we called it, Foreboding Prices. And I looked through this stuff, and there's a handmade, photocopied stapled thing called Pratchett Notes. I pulled it out. I start flicking through it, and it says it's got photos of Terry, but it's like taken from peeking up between cars or peeking through bushes or around corners. It's got his schedule for every single day for the past couple of weeks. Monday, 9:17 a.m. Terry left the house. He got into his car. Photograph of his car and the number plate. He drove to this cafe. He met his literary agent, this guy. Here's what they ate. Here's what they got off the menu. Here's a photograph of the menu and how much that cost. Then he went down here. He got a birthday present for his daughter. Here's what he bought her. I was like, I got hold of that. So, Terry, you might want to have a look at this. When you go outside, do you sometimes notice that the bushes sort of uproot themselves, and every time you turn around, there's that strange feeling that you're being watched? Yeah, that's because you, my friend, are being watched. Those will bastards. Yeah, strange days. But that company that I was working for, they were just tearing themselves to pieces. Again, I probably told you this one, but there was a partnership. The ex-Beamer, they had a senior programmer, and they had this couple who had another computer games company, and they kind of all merged together. Well, that couple's marriage was in absolute flaming ruins. The wife was hiring like young guys who had no experience on the basis that they're hot. Yeah, she's basically hiring people on the angling like, yeah, I'd like to shake that one. Husband, meanwhile, has got au pair girls coming over from Sweden, and it's pretty obvious that, you know, he's having affairs with them. So we're just, as an outsider, I'm sort of seeing this and like, that marriage is going to go down in flames because they each think it's not an arrangement. It's not like an open relationship. They both are pulling the wool over each other's eyes, and it's going to get found out in this huge explosion. But meanwhile, these guys started to get very self-important because we're doing like huge amounts of you know, publicity for Terry Pratchett games, and, you know, we're obviously going to make a mint of this. They started burning their entire budget on lifestyle. So if they had to get somewhere, we won't just, you know, catch a train into town. We'll have a limo service take us into town because we're important. So working on this game, it was kind of interesting because I got to meet a ton of people. The voice actors we had for this, we had Tony Robinson. So he's a famous British comedian, not so famous back then, but I knew of him, so he was one. So I got to like work and read opposite him. But John Pertwee, Doctor Who, good old Doctor Who. So I got to talk and meet with him. A perfect gentleman, a wonderful guy, just so joyous and so like cooperative, an absolute professional, a delight. But, you know, as a this was my Doctor Who, you know, and writing for Eric Idle from Monty Python, just stunning, amazing. You know, talking with him. These guys had other projects that they were working on, and what they were doing, they got very self-important, so they started buying the rights to different media properties, and then they just leave them. So I'd written this work for these guys very, very, very quickly. They didn't realize how fast I could write. That's why I was able to write all the reserve stuff in case, you know, Terry bailed. But I was there on, like, you know, this long work visa, and I was supposed to be there till the end of the project. So I started doing things like I'd just take one of the company cars because they still weren't paying me, but they did have this fleet of company cars, and they had these kind of charge it cards so you could charge, you know, petrol to them. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to tour some of England. So I went touring England in their car. It's like, well, if you're not paying me one way, you're going to pay me another way. But what these guys had done meanwhile is they'd gone to a big show and they'd seen this very beautiful young lady who was a, you know, a hot young model, and I think she was lounging around in a bikini showing off boats, you know, come by these luxury yachts. Well, they decided each of the guys involved in this partnership, yeah, they're going to hire her, and she's going to be like, hey, would you like to, oh, what do we need? Yeah, like a media manager for the company. Yeah. And they started, each of the male guys in the company management, they're angling for this woman. So first off, they gave her this magnificent office, but then they started giving her things. They gave her like free trips overseas, a car. They financed a whole apartment for her and everything. And she was a nice lady. I actually kind of liked her, but I, you know, went off for a long walkie-talkie with her and just said, what's going on? And she said, oh yeah, these guys are all trying to cheat on their various wives. They're very at me. Said, look, I think this company's going down. They're just spending money like water. So, you know, I've seen it. They're buying all these media properties, you know, spending $250,000 bucks to get like the rights to do things like Columbo, Naked Gun, all these different sort of classic media properties, the X-Files. You know, they're buying all of these, you know, hot properties at the time and doing nothing with them. So they're just like losing the licenses afterwards because they've just let them sit for a year and just haven't done any developments. That means, you know, the people can just resell the license onwards. So she said, I'm just getting what I can before they collapse. Like, oh, sure, you go, girl, whatever. Yes, so that company killed itself through lifestyle. So there's your second lesson. Never be so full of yourself. Just live frugally and get the job done if you're running a company. There were perfectly good sound studios and everything in London. They decide they're going to do all the recording in Hollywood because that's where real star quality people would do all their sound recording. So everyone who's in London They get onto jets. And of course, we're not talking economy. They've got to go first class, including voice actors who are in London. They fly everyone to LA. These guys decide that, oh, well, where do like Hollywood stars stay? Well, big Beverly Hills Hotel. We'll stay at that one. What, the one that like the Rolling Stones and everyone stay at? Yeah, because we're stars now. They stay there and they hire this really expensive sound studio and they do all this stuff there. And frankly, it's a computer game. No one really cares where you sodding recorded the sound. So they just burned through money, literally like pitchforking this thing onto a pyre. Now this Discworld 1 and Discworld 2, which I both did for them, world number 1. Let's be quite clear on that. World number 1 on every format that wasn't like home entertainment system. This didn't come out for Super Nintendo or anything, but so IBM. Then the jiggery pokery began. As I told you, I was being paid royalties. They decided that, well, hang on, they hadn't realized how much money these royalties were going to be. So they came in and started trying to renegotiate the royalties. We said we were going to give you 5%. Or we want to renegotiate that down to 1%. So, no, I've done all this and I've had no pay and I've been sitting here for all these months and months and months and months and months. I had to suspend payments on my house on the promise that I'm on this big job, I'll come back and I'll be able to back pay the mortgage and continue paying the mortgage. Costs you a massive interest, but what else can I do? So these guys are trying to basically reduce what they're going to pay me. And they went, oh, by the way, this only counts for IBM. No, it says I get a percentage of royalties for all sales of, units of the game by your company. Doesn't matter if it's on IBM, Amiga, Commodore, all this sort of stuff, which was still, viable formats. And they hadn't realized that this was going to be money out of their pocket, because now the pinch is on because, they've spent so much. Yeah. This was the game that hit, or the 2 games that hit world number 1 and earned me not a cent, not a sodding brass razoo, because what they did was overspent. They collapsed the companies. They had run up so many massive debts that these guys just seized all the assets, which included all of the royalties from these games. The banks and so on that they had massively overborrowed from in order to finance this had, when this thing collapsed, they had a higher call on the money coming in from assets than the people who had worked on it. So I certainly didn't get paid for it, but I'm pretty certain a lot of the senior programmers and so on who were all there to work on for royalties, we got nothing. I had to leave the country in the end because my work visa was up, so I had to go home. That's it. You can't stay in the country. I got back to Australia sometime later. I get a call from the secretary, who I quite liked, and she just said, we've turned up to work and found the building's been stripped over the weekend. These guys have every bit of furniture, and there's just a notice from the county sheriff on the door saying, assets seized. And when they've contacted, they've just said, oh, these guys have done a runner. So, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I lost my house. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I'm living in a friend's living room to this day. So, so third lesson. Money up front. Money up front. And, keep an eye on people who might do a runner. Again, I was a bright, young writer, willing to trust old comrades and so on. I have to say, this experience was my absolute loss of innocence. I have never, ever trusted anyone on business deals, no matter how close they are to me, ever since. This was the big lesson. Because if anyone was going to stand by you, someone that had suffered through a badly run company with you surely would be the ones who would come out the other end and want to do it right. But they didn't. There were a few interesting good moments in this. Like I said, I got to meet a lot of very interesting people. That weird habit these guys had of buying up all these properties meant that, you know, I got to speak to Peter Falk. I got to speak to Leslie Nielsen. For some reason, I would hang out with local kind of British actors and so on. So I got to meet like Nigel Planner, who played Neil from The Young Ones, and hang out with him. And he was living in a houseboat off the Isle of Dogs. And yeah, he was, oh yeah, I want to give up acting, and I really want to get into computer game design. Like, really? Come with me. What? Outside the party. What? Right now. Go. What? We're having a walk. Walking along the riverfront with Nigel Planner saying, are you crazy? Just, you live in a houseboat, okay, in central London. I am living in a cellar with cockroaches. Which of us has the more glamorous lifestyle? Which of us has more potential earnings? You know, don't do it. Stay an actor, goddammit. He did. Yeah. As it became more and more obvious that, you know, something was weird and they weren't going to pay me, yeah, I took, by the way, one of their company cars. I took it on a mighty journey. Never-ending story. I took that thing to the Orkney Islands. Got the ferry out, drove through the Orkney Islands, got a ferry out to the Hebrides. I drove that. And I was just phoning in. They phone, oh, hi, do you guys need me in the office for anything? Well, let's have a look. No, but yeah, phone like tomorrow and see if we need you. Okay. I'm in the Arctic Circle. You know, and in fact, in the Orkneys, I had to, oh, God, a trail just kind of petered out. Well, I'm from Australia. Well, where am I going? Well, I've got a paper map. I'm going this way. So I just gunned the thing. I just drove cross country, but it had like those little kind of plasticky scoop spoilers front and back. Yeah, I tore the front one off somewhere. It just came off going over some rocks. Oh, okay, whatever. Oh, there's the standing stone circle I've been looking for. Was it Maze Howell? And so when I came back and parked this thing, oh shit. Yeah, the front spoiler's gone, which makes it look a bit odd. So I just took a screwdriver and removed the rear spoiler. There we go. Now it looks fine. I'll just park it in the rest of the row. No harm done. A minor revenge, but a fun one. So, Discworld Tales. Yeah, so this is probably the one downer I'll ever tell you guys. I have to say I have never recovered financially from this because I had to pay the debts on a house that I lost for the next 20 years, and with other life crashes and so on. Yeah, I quite literally I lost that house in what, 1995 or something. I just finished paying the final debt still owed on that thing last year. So, you know, we're talking almost 30 years of debt for something I didn't have anymore. Yay! Even with a contract, you can't trust people. I would literally recommend installing Cortex bombs if you have to deal with business people, or just don't deal with the computer games industry. Just don't. It's literally, as Hunter S. Thompson said about another industry, the industry is nothing but a narrow plastic corridor where thieves and pimps run free and weak men die like dogs, and where lesser intellects shelter in the corners, masturbating like chimpanzees. Computer games industry right there. But, as I said, funny moments. I did get to bump around the place. I did get to roam. I did get to meet some interesting people. And look, to a writer, there are no negative experiences. Every single thing gives you more material to write on. So, cheers everybody, and may your journey be smoother.